Members, it's the appointed time and we have a quorum. Today and tomorrow, we have 6 meetings in order to deal with the items on the agenda. After the first meeting, we'll have a rest of 5 minutes, and the second meeting will start at 11:05 and will finish at 1:05. And the third meeting will start at 2:30 in the afternoon. After that, we'll take a rest of 5 minutes, and then the fourth meeting will start at 4:35 p.m. I'll remind members that if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interests related to the items on the agenda today, please declare the nature of such interest before you speak on the item according to ROP 83A. I will also draw your attention to the decision under ROP 84 about voting when there is a conflict of interest. And now we continue the scrutiny of FCR 2017-18-13, and that is PWSC 44. Members are invited to recommend to increase the approved project estimate of 5060R by $286.2 million from $927 million to $1213.2 million in money of the day prices for South Island Line East essential public infrastructure works. The PWSC discussed the item at 3 meetings, and the administration has submitted many information papers, and we spent 3 hours 38 minutes in our meetings on the 23rd of June and the 7th of July. I'd like to remind members that the questions you ask at the meeting must be directly related to the item, and members should seek not to duplicate or repeat other members' points and what has been discussed at the PWSC. More wide or broad policy questions should be directed at the council or panels. And if you have 37A motions, please submit them as soon as possible. We have already received 5 such motions. I declare that I am a non-executive director of the East Asian Bank. To answer members' questions, we have Ms. Rebecca Poon Ting Ting, DS for Transport and Housing, and her team. We'll continue with questions. Mr. Nathan Law, who would like to ask questions? Mr. Eddie Chu, 1 minute. Mr. Eddie Chu. Chairman, last time I asked what increase was it like for on-cost for the MTRCL. The latest information paper, which has not printed out for members, had this figure, $47.8 million. From the first meeting of PWSC, the first question at that meeting was asked by Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, and it was asked why it should be such a big sum. Can that be reduced? That is $21.9 million. And then only today you tell us that the increase in on-cost for MTR is not $21.9 million, but rather $47.8 million. Can you explain that to us? I think you owe us an apology. You did your sums wrong. It was a false kind of calculation. Rebecca Poon. Near the end of the meeting last time, members asked the figure $21.9 million, whether it was a wrong figure. We provided many supplementary papers, and we could not identify the paragraph pointed out by Dr. or Mr. Eddie Chu. The $21.9 million should be given to MTR because of an increase in project estimate. That is about, or according to the entrustment agreement. This is about the design fee. And in all papers, including our supplementary papers, we were talking about prices in September 2010. And in fact, after the meeting, we explained to members. Sorry, Mr. Chu is not coming through. Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, Mr. Chu is not coming through to interpreters. Mr. Chu is speaking, but he is not coming through. Mr. Chu, please allow her to finish. Sorry, can I please add? Please continue. We have followed established practice in presenting the information in this format. We must have a direct comparison to the sum applied for. And when we applied for funding in the first instance, we used prices at September 2011. So we gave you that figure for the sake of comparison. But with members' request, we have been supplying more information, including the calculation done on the basis of money of the day prices. And now we have the figure for members' reference. I'd like to emphasize that $1.9 million was the figure that was based on prices in September 2010. Dr. Edward Yu, 1 minute. Thank you. I will follow up on Mr. Chu's question. Still, you are doing your sums wrong. 2910. You say, without a lot of justification, that it was related to prices in September 2011. But when you change it to MOD, you do not have the formula, but the formula is with the Treasury. The core of my question is, how would you apportion 2910 between 2010 and 2019? Even if you push it to the limits, of course, that would not be reasonable. Even if 2910 is all spent in 2019, you can only multiply it with 1.49329. And by that, you could only have 4345.4, and so you are still doing your sums wrong. I'd like to say that the format and the presentation are well established for public works projects, and the price adjustment factors are used by the entire government. They are updated biannually, updated half-yearly, sorry. So we are talking about the same figure. It's just that we are talking about prices at different times. Please switch on the mic for Dr. Edward Yu. Why don't you now give us a price which can be linked to the price adjustment factors in Table 1? Because the figures don't add up. And you can tell me then how much of the 2910 would be spent in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, etc. Put them against the table, because this is the calculation table you yourself devised. Can I ask Highways to explain? Yes, Highways. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say that the conversion using price adjustment factors is such that we did the estimate in 2010-2011. In fact, the price adjustment factors were higher than the actual ones, and so we still use 16.5% on the basis of the basic project cost for design and management done by MTRCL. Mr. Raymond Chen, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to follow up on the NALA investigation questions. If I do not get satisfactory answers, I will submit a 37A. You said that starting from March 2008, Gammon was already doing investigation around the NALA. But according to a reply from the MTRCL last Friday, it talked to the DSD in 2009 about feasibility of doing investigation in the NALA. Can you tell us why you did not talk to DSD in early 2008 to do drilling within the NALA? And after drilling was done by Gammon, you only took it up with DSD in 2009. When did you exactly talk to DSD in 2009? Did MTR bump into difficulties, so it talked to MTR about the feasibility of doing investigation within the NALA? Is it that, we have decided to build a station there? Why is it that you should do the feasibility study first? And also, how much time does it require for you to set up a work platform? Does it require 2-3 months, or else why could you not do it in November 2008 and then from December to February, when it is the dry season, then you can do investigation within the NALA? Who would take the question? MTR, Mr. Wong. Thank you, Chair. In 2008, we did some drilling work, and it was at the initial design stage. We did not have the entire plan at that time. We tried to get some information to decide on the alignment of the railway. In 2009, we started to do this detailed design, and so we did more drilling. And in 2009, we needed more information, so we asked the DSD whether we could do it within the NALA. But then there were constraints, as mentioned in the last meeting, so it was not possible to do it within the NALA. Any other questions? What about those 3 months? You should have done it in November 2008. Is it that it's very difficult for you to set up a work platform? And is it that you passed the dry season, so you gave up? Well, of course, in November, if we had to set up a work platform, we would have to design the work platform and arrange the contractor to set it up. And then by the time it would be the rainy season, so there was not enough time. Fernando Zhao, 3 minutes. Chairman, the Bureau is resorting to artful language. Sometimes they talk about 2009, sometimes 2010. When you answer members' questions, you should be clear and direct. People pointed to an issue, and you should not duck it. And then it is only after repeated questioning then you would say, oh, we were using 2010 prices. To be frank, this gives people the impression that you are deliberately ducking questions from us, and it seems you must have something to hide. This is not a healthy situation for the Council. We are asking questions in the open. We are using public money. How is the money spent? How is the estimate drawn up? Everything should be clearly laid out. Please do not sidestep the issue. I asked you last time because you said that you need to subsidize the MTR. And the formula is such that you would have to use the expected capital return, and then you would have to add to it the weighted capital cost, and then you have to add 1 to 3% on top of that. I would have you tell us, how do you calculate the capital return, the expected capital return? And now you tell us that this is a commercial secret that you cannot divulge. But we are using public money to subsidize MTR. So can you at least tell me how much it is? Ms. Poon? Chairman, I'd like to emphasize that today we are discussing South Island Line East, essential public infrastructure works and supplementary provision. The member is asking about the SILE project itself, and this item has nothing to do with the details of that project. And I'd like to clarify, we approach preparation for electrical meetings in a serious manner, and we would lay out all figures for members' reference. We have also adopted the well-established format and presentation for FC papers. Maybe you may have a different viewpoint about the presentation, but we definitely cannot say that we are not laying bare all the information to members. I hope members can understand this point. You did not answer my question. I asked you how much. Tell me the figure. You spoke at long and you did not answer my question. MTR? Thank you, Chair. Member, as we said in the paper, members asked percentage of the weighted capital cost and capital return. Well, the figure is related to the percentage, so sorry, we cannot supply it here. Sorry. Well, this is public money. How are we subsidizing MTR in building SIL East. You can't even tell us the figure. So how are we spending our public money? Dr. Fernando Zhang, your question has nothing to do with this item. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, 1 minute. Sorry, Fernando Zhang is not coming through. Well, those are two different projects. They are unrelated. Dr. Fernando Zhang is speaking, but he is not coming through to interpreters. He doesn't have the mic. Please wait for your next turn. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, 1 minute. Chairman, as the Chinese saying goes, you are being stealthy in trying to get money. I don't know whether I can still monitor the administration. If the audit were to inquire into the matter, you would have a lot of questions to answer at the PAC. I hope Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh will write to the Audit Commission for it to look into all these calculations. You say you are not cheating us, then answer questions. And after that, you may even point out that we asked the wrong questions, but this is not what you are doing. I will say again, this is unwise because you are being stealthy and you're trying to get more money from us. But there is no way we can deal with this. Dr. Fernando Zhang, 2 minutes. Answer the question. Do not shy away from it anymore. There was this paper at the last meeting, and it is entitled SILE EPIW. I'm reading out your paper and I'm telling you just to give me one more figure. You say it's a commercial secret. Then I would ask you, we are using public money to subsidize MTR. Vis-a-vis SILE, why is it a commercial secret? Ms. Poon. Thank you, Chair. We have submitted a lot of supplementary information in response to members' request, but as we said, a lot of the information may not be related to the item under discussion, but we have done our best to respond to members. With regard to SILE, Chairman, please, I like to say this to the public. We are scrutinizing supplementary provision for SIL East. And you are talking about essential public infrastructure works, which include footbridges, access ways, and an open space nearby. These facilities are, of course, related to SIL East, because without SIL East, there would not be these facilities. These facilities are to increase accessibility to SILE. If they are not related to SILE, then they should not be mentioned in papers on SILE. Please do not pull wool over the eyes of the public. They are related to the SILE. It is just that it is not directly related to this item under discussion. Please come clean and do not mislead the public. Your time is up. Dr. Edward Yu, 1 minute. Not Ma Fung Kwok, Chairman. Well, okay. First, I'd like to thank you for supplying the comparison on changes in design and compensation. In the latest paper, Annex 1, you have the total sums for these two entries. Well, it's rather interesting. If you add everything up, it is about $230 million. The $230 million, and compared to the latest price adjustment contingency, they are almost the same. VO and claims. Is it that they would be paid by the price adjustment factor contingency? Highways, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This adjustment and claim the MTRCL, after auditing, they estimate that they need to pay the actual MOD to the subcontractors. So that would include the adjustment in the original budget. But this figure, according to MOD, it was calculated based on MOD. Mr. Ju Hoidek, I've explained many times. 1 minute, Mr. Eddie Chu. Chairman, I'd like to ask Mr. Chung from Highways. In 5th of April, in the first discussion of Southern Island Line, he answered Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. What did Mr. Kwok Wai Kang ask? Why payment to MTRCL, the management fee had to increase by 29.1 million, and his response was the management fees went up, the construction price went up, that's why we had to do so. And when you answered Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, were you aware that he understood that the 21.9 million was based on 2011 prices, and it wasn't the actual 47.8 million that you would pay MTRCL? Mr. Chung, at the time, my response was based on the documents that we submitted. I explained based on those figures. In our document, it listed out the 21.9 million was based on the 2010 September prices. Were you assuming that Mr. Kwok Wai Kang was aware that 21.9 was a 2010 price? Do you think that he understood that in your discussion you weren't misleading him? Thank you, Chairman. I did not assume that how the legislator would understand these figures. It was based on the document figures that were submitted. Because Kwok Wai Kang, Mr. Kwok Wai Kang was saying that your whole fifth sum was 21.9 million, and he asked the 286 million was the extra money that you were going to pay. And Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, his intention was that 21.9 million was the money that you would be adding to, you were paying extra to MTRCL. Don't you think you were misleading Mr. Kwok Wai Kang? Just now I had explained I did not speculate how the legislator would understand the figures. I was explaining based on the figures we submitted. Mr. Leung Kok Hong. Chairman, you don't need to assume, we have to assume how you're explaining. You had to pay extra. Mr. Kwok Wai Kang asked you, you were answering in 2010 prices, but the actual figures you paid were the money that you ultimately paid, and we were asking how did you make up for the discrepancy. And you said you won't assume what the legislators are doing, but the thing is we have to guess what you're doing. What kind of monitoring is this? You are shifting the goalposts. How can we aim? How can we monitor you? Also want to say that when you connect to the MTR, you are benefiting the MTR. That's why we want to ask why there was an extra payment, because it wasn't included in the original budget. You were doing so through the district council. You were saying if we don't have the facilities, it would affect the residents, but they are benefiting. You can pay half. You have to be neighborly. We don't need to negotiate. Do you want you need to allow them time to respond. Ms. Poon? We had stated repeatedly that the infrastructure work, we had a discussion with residents. So aside making it, well, I'm asking, you're the 75% majority shareholder of MTRCL. So you're benefiting 20-odd% of the institutional investors. And you say that you have 75% ownership, so there's no problem. But there's 20+% interest in institutional investors, and that overrides our interest. So even if you heed the district council's suggestion, there should be a negotiation. When you benefit the Island South residents, you're also benefiting the MTRCL. There are consequences. That's the difference between rule of law and rule by law. So this is a basic infrastructure, and it was approved by LegCo. We've heard your views. So as we delve into it, this is not actual prices. So how do you make up the discrepancy? There's a 10% adjustment cost. You cannot bypass that argument. Even if you didn't spend any extra money, we want to know where there has been an over budget. That is the reason for the review. We have to pay. We just want to avoid similar incidents in the future. We don't want to say that there has been graft and corruption. Mr. Fernando Zhang. Just now, the question I had was the government subsidy to MTRCL. You cannot disclose the amount. It's because it's a commercial secret. Could you explain to the public, when we use public funds to subsidize the MTRCL to build the SIL, how is this a commercial secret? Ms. Poon? We had explained in the past, when we sought funding, we had reported to LegCo, SILE, it's not financially feasible. So the government had to make up the shortfall, had to subsidize it such that SILE could commence. So we had reported to LegCo. The difference was 9.9 billion, and that was November 2010 figures. Well, just now you said it was a commercial secret. That is a different issue, the WACC. According to your document, paragraph, page 13, footnote 1, the figure, the MTRCL said that it was a commercial secret and they couldn't provide that. Are we talking about the same figure, Ms. Poon? I think the legislator is referring to the WACC figure. The MTRCL representative said that they could not disclose that figure. So my report, the SILE, the shortfall was 9.9 billion, and it was a 2010 November MOD, and that's why the government gave the MTRCL development rights. Mr. Eddie Chu, Chairman, I need to point out, in our discussion since April, we have been misled. The LegCo has been misled, and we have been pushing forward, and the government has given us its actual expenditure. So I want to ask the government, Mr. Lai from the Treasury or the other relevant officials, so when they subsequently came to respond to Public Works questions, could you promise that your responses will be actual expenditure? So we should not be guessing whether it was an approved budget, and sometimes you were talking about because the big figure should be actual expenditure. They shouldn't be playing games like in the SILE. Thank you, Chairman. We will take on board your views, and in light of legislators of calculation based on MOD and the fixed costs, there are a lot of concerns. We will review our presentation regarding construction costs explanations. We want to assist legislators understand the whole expenditure. We will do that in the future. Next, Mr. Fernando Chung. The 9.9 billion, does that include the subsidy I was referring to? Ms. Poon? I can only repeat that the 9.9 billion is a discrepancy. If the government did not, well, Secretary, you don't need to repeat. I'm asking you, when we funded MTRCL 9.9 billion to build SILE, does that include footnote 1 on page 13, the subsidy? Because MTRCL said clearly just now that that is a commercial secret and they cannot disclose. And you said the whole shortfall was 9.9 billion. So 9.9 billion, does it include that subsidy? Ms. Poon, when we calculate the shortfall, we had to consider the return on capital of MTRCL. You need to answer yes or no. It is included. Mr. Chen Jixun. So when we look at the budget, the overrun budget, we have to consider whether we should foot the whole bill, whether MTR has a role. We heard MTRCL respond that they could, before they decided the alignment, they had to do preliminary surveying, and then they missed the drought period, and if they waited, it would be postponed. So I'd like the government to answer. Do you fully accept their explanation? Do you think that they did their best? You said that they did not need to discuss with you because the works, they were responsible for the works, and because of this, they had to claim all the budget, all the budget overruns. Did you have to negotiate with them because they didn't do that preparatory work? When the MTRCL said that they had extra expenditure, they did explain the reasons to us and the decisions they made. So it was not just us. We examined in detail their figures, and in terms of project development, their considerations and decisions were reasonable. Mr. Yu Chong-yim. Thank you, Chairman. I think we understand why the government doesn't want me to stay in LegCo. People engaged in engineering will understand that there has been a significant economic incentive where money that should not have been spent was spent. You're saying that 176 million multiplied by the factor, and that's why we had the management fee of 21.9 million. And now you're saying you have to use the 16.5%, but the construction base fee increased. So working backwards, that means you used 289 million. So According to your supplement document, you said that includes the VO and claims. So that means people who do engineering, they understand if you enlarge the VO and claim, then you can collect more management fees. So this is a management loophole, and that you have been concealing that. So we see the error here. It's not 29.1 million. It's by enlarging the figure, you can enlarge the VO and claims, and they can, through the 16.5%, collect more money. So all people engaged in engineering understand this. Ms. Poon? In monitoring MTRCL construction works, if they have changes or claims, they need to explain in detail. So after examination, we felt it was reasonable before we agreed. So MTRCL cannot, as the legislator said, cannot cook the figures. They have to have concrete reasons. It has to be approved and scrutinized by us before they can do so. Mr. Leung Yu-zhong, 1 minute. Just now, Mr. Chan Jixun said that we are trying to audit and see whether we had paid extra, and we are looking at whether these payments were made reasonably, and the government officials saying that the geology and other construction complexities, these have been discussed with MTR and they had a reasonable explanation. That's why you accepted their extra funding request. But in your document you say that if there are any expected design changes or geological changes, then the MTRCL has to bear the costs. Well, when you say that you had discussed it with MTR, you feel it's reasonable and they don't need to bear the responsibility, there has to be reasons. Could you tell us what those reasons are on each occasion? Could you give us the detailed discussion? Chairman, the paper refers to MTRCL and their contractors. They signed engineering contracts. So if there were changes in the engineering works for different reasons, including geological complexities, the MTRCL, being a party to the contract, they have to bear responsibility. But the government and MTRCL, in the agreement, the government needs to bear some of the construction costs. The government will also monitor MTRCL. So these engineering changes have to be reported to the government, and we will have examined these in detail. So the question was, what were these reasons? Well, in engineering contracts, there are a lot of scenarios. There isn't a singular incident or singular reason. So whenever they raise these changes, we had audited these requests. Before we allow Mr. Leung Go-hong, we have a few legislators in the queue. They have asked for 10 rounds. Some asked 5 or 6 times. So those who have not yet asked questions, we need to bring them. They need to raise these as soon as possible. Next, we have Mr. Leung Go-hong.
Chairman, Dr. Yu was wrong. I mean, this was the way we treated public facilities. We would give give them the approval. If they make any mistake, we'll still pay them. For example, if the operation fail, they can still apply the same formula. This is how we deal with the MTRCL. We are going by the old system. You've approved $9.9 billion. You said that, so you said there is a discrepancy. You pay them $9.9 billion. Even if we pay them, if in the accounting sense, you only have $9.9 billion in the accounts. Of course, if you pay them indiscriminately, if you take the money out of $9.9 billion, we will not allow you to do that. If you adopt such a, unreasonable approach, we will not be able to identify the reasons for the cost overrun. For example, if you miss the opportunity, and if you procrastinate, you will miss the opportunity, and then the MTRCL should be responsible. You say if they are indecisive and they miss the dry season, and as a result additional work needs to be done, then you need to argue with them. You have to ask them why they were so indecisive. And because of their indecisiveness, they missed the timing, and then this resulted in cost overrun, and we shouldn't pay them. It's very simple accounting sense. The money is there, $9.9 billion, but if the funding was approved wrongly, then I will have to, if we allow you the funding, we pay you like that. It's like a child after the parent has, given the money to pay for his textbooks, spend it on electronic games instead because he couldn't resist the temptation. Would the parent still pay the child? How can the housewife, be able to manage, the family budget? That child should be punished. Perhaps Mr. Lau Chen from the FSTB could answer the question. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for the question. I think the THB colleague already explained that the $9.9 billion is injected into the principal works, which is the responsibility of the MTRCL. What we say in our paper today is about the supplementary public facilities, making it convenient for the public to ride on the MTRCL. When we applied for funding earlier, we said that these were part of the government projects, and the government entrusted the MTRC to build those facilities. So any cost overrun in relation to that falls within the responsibility of the government, and therefore the government should pay. It has nothing to do with the $9.9 billion. Mr. Leung Yu Chung. Chairman, the officials admitted that should there be any variations in the works, then it should be for the employer, namely the MTRCL, to make the compensation. But then the MTR has an agreement with the government, and if the overruns were reasonable, if the variations are reasonable, the government has all along been subsidizing the MTRCL or paying the difference. So how do you monitor the MTR as to whether or not they are implementing the project in a reasonable manner? You need to go through lots of documents, and you need to be satisfied that what they do is reasonable. But you say that too many such documents, you can't provide them for us. It's not that we don't trust you, but we want to know what are your criteria. You want so my speculation is whether the MTRC doesn't need to be responsible for the compensation. The government is paying the bill, and therefore they don't care. Even and they would indiscriminately allow for these variations. If you are so lax, how can we monitor the way you supervise the MTRCL? Director. Mr. Leung asked how we monitor the MTRCL. I think this involves many, judgments in the engineering sense. In the whole process of monitoring the MTRCL, we will require the corporation to, in respect of each variation of every project, to explain in detail why they are making such variations, and the additional costs arising from such variations, they would need to give us an explanation. So we would take a look at them in detail. They would give us the explanation. We would put many questions to them, which they would answer. Very often, well, after we put our questions to them, and in response to our, comments, they would, on many occasions, make some adjustments to the claims. So we have adopted a reasonable standard to monitor the way the MTRCL, implements the projects. The standard we adopt is the same as those which apply to our own, works or projects. Mr. Chen Chi-chin. Could you press the button again? You should have 1 minute. I already allow you 3 minutes. Mr. Chen Chi-chin. You've given us this number today. It would mean that the government has already accepted the MTRC's explanation that they've done the level best, but the cost overrun is due to unexpected, unforeseen circumstances. So what I'd like to ask is whether there's any responsibility on the part of the MTRCL causing the cost overrun and they have to, pay. Does the MTRCL has that figure? That is the part of the cost overrun that you should be responsible. Director, could you give us some cases which the MTRCL has to pay? The information we have provided this time will include those areas which the government should be responsible for paying. As to whether or not there have been in situations where the MTRCL felt they had to be responsible, I'll ask the MTR to supplement. Where we, carry out this project is like the way we carry out other MTR projects. We don't have only 1 or 2 persons on our team. We would engage professional, engineers, surveyors, and analysts to help us. And in the whole project, when it comes to cost overruns, we would clearly explain the reasons why we have such overruns, and these are all caused by unforeseen circumstances. So the additional funding that we are now applying for are all fully justified. Could we switch on the mic for Mr. Chen again? Now, for this whole project, so none of the cost overrun was due to the fault of the MTRCL, and for which the MCR has to pay. Is that right? Well, the MTRCL's supervisory system has been in place all along. When many of the claims lodged by our contractors have been rejected by us, we exercised our professional judgment and rejected many of these claims for cost overruns. So you would only submit those claims if you think they are the responsibility of the government. But if it is due to the fault of the contractor, you should you would ask contractors to bear the responsibility. You should have told us that earlier, Tanya Chan. According to the new document FC 218/161701. The basic estimate, including the construction costs, consultancy fees, construction costs, contingencies, and so on, and cost price variations, and also difference between the original estimate and the money of the day price payment, and also the difference in cash flow. Is it due to the unexpected circumstances and the additional works, and the difference between the original estimate and so regarding the difference in variations in cash flow, could you give us a detailed breakdown for that, Mr. Chen? The so-called variations in cash flow. Our original estimate was the project should proceed as plan. We would, for example, carry out so much work in a year. It's like the documents that we collect every year, you earmark, a sum for each of the items, and you add up the aggregate. Now, normally we would have the estimate for how much we need to spend every year for the next few years. After we know how much we need to spend every year, we would factor in the price adjustment factor, and then we can guess the actual amount to be paid according to money of the day prices. But due to different reasons, there might be variations, and if there should be such variations, the amount that we need to pay every year may be different from the original estimate. If for some reasons, due to, say for example, due to inclement weather, the project might be delayed, so the amount that we've earmarked for that year may not be able to carry out, and this will impact on the cash flow situation. So the money which is spent, expenditure which is later, would mean that it would be more expensive. So the final amount to be paid, therefore, would be higher than the original estimate, and this is the reason why. Mr. Chair, I was asking whether there will be any duplication in the accounting sense. Well, for this estimate, this is done in the light of the latest works which have been completed, and also estimate for the expected expenditures to incur. So there shouldn't be any duplicates. So in that case, could they give us a breakdown? In Annex 5 of the paper, we already have provided the projections for the cash flow compared with the original estimate. So all those are already in the paper. But do you have the number for that paper, Mr. Chan? It's PWSC 2016-17-144. Okay, I'll now let the next colleague ask question first. Fernando Zhao. Well, you've been explaining to us that first of all, it was due to geological conditions and the underground facilities there, which resulted in a cost overrun of more than 30%. On page 9 of your paper, you say the sites for which the works were carried out, the records didn't show the underground utilities there, such as the water pipes and so on. Chairman. Because the location of these utilities are not so clear, I think this is exactly because of that we have 3 workers who die working underground recently. You say you don't have a comprehensive database for the underground utilities, but you do have an electronic platform for which you can share records of the underground utilities. So when will you be able to build a complete, database so that when works are carried out, we know exactly, the location of these utilities? You've not made any improvements at all over the years. Before the year 2004, the government had conducted a study to find out whether we need to build a comprehensive database for the underground utilities. We took into consideration various factors. We've consulted the relevant professions, and we've also come to this council to explain to members. We felt that the electronic platform, using the electronic platform to share such data would be the best way. So far, we have no plans to build a comprehensive database. Chairman. So this was your consideration in 2004. That was more than a decade ago. You said it is not necessary. But because of that, we have workers who died, and you have repeated cost overruns. and then again for this project you say you don't have the accurate information, and because of that you have cost overruns. So you've not learned from your experience. You're still insisting on using the same system which you think has been proven effective. Well, this time the MTR has already explained that at the work site there are many underground utilities which are very old. And for these old utilities, the information relating to these utilities, I think the relevant companies involved, even they don't have such information. In other words, the data is not complete. For the newly installed underground facilities since 2004, the road excavation permit issued by the Highways Department already required the utility companies to keep proper records of these utilities. So the new records for the different utility companies should have such information. But this time we have a problem in relation to the older facilities or utilities. And we therefore are not able to retrieve the old information relating to these utilities. And even if we build a new database, we wouldn't be able to resolve the problem. Dr. Yu, Edichi, you've asked more than 10 questions already. So I'll allow members to finish with the questions, and I will move on to the next session where each member will have 3 minutes. I'll read out the names first. Chen Chi-chun, Fernando Zheng, Leung Yu-chung, Tan Yue-chen, Yu Chung-yin, and Eddie Ju. After we've completed this session, we have the final 3 minutes for each member. We'll start with Mr. Chen Chi-chun. I'll ask a specific question. Before the infrastructure works for the SRL East project, the preliminary, investigation work were done by the MTRC. NEX 124, for that contract, what is the amount? And the estimate for the surveying works, were they jointly assessed by the government and the MTR, or did the MTR propose the amount and the government pay for it? Did the MTRC assess survey did the MTRC underestimated the complexity of the surveying work? As a result, it was not able to complete the surveying of the drainage system during the dry season. The surveying contract was roughly about $8.7 million. When we conducted the advanced surveying works, we pay for the works, and they were paid out of the budget for the project. In the whole surveying process, our geotechnical engineers designed the entire the location and the standards for the geotechnical surveys and the requirements for the analysis of the plans. All the the entire surveying process and the findings have to be submitted to the CEDD for approval before we could proceed with a detailed design for the works. We'll be moving into the next session for each member to be given 3 minutes. So, are you going to would like to ask a question now? In that case, you can use the 3 minutes later on. Leung Yu-chung, 1 minute. Chairman. We should monitor whether the government's the way the government dispenses with such, whether the expenditure incurred is reasonable. And now what happened is that for the MTRCL and its contractors, if the MTRC has to pay for the additional works, and they will have to pay for it. So how can we monitor the way you monitor the MTRCL? Of course, I cannot say that the MTRC is colluding with its contractors. But when you monitor the performance of the MTRC, you would apply your own standards, and I don't know whether those standards are reasonable. We don't know. The work is so complex, and you don't give us the details. So how can we monitor the way you supervise the MTRCL?
Thank you, Chair. I said just now, we at the department does launch our own works items. Some of the works are entrusted to the MTR, and we apply the same standards in supervising these projects, whether we monitor the MTR in executing entrusted projects or our own projects. We apply the same criteria. Members can monitor our own projects and our entrusted projects to the MTR through the Legislative Council mechanism. And for our own projects, we apply the same standards to supervise the process, to see whether there would be any adjustments and whether the adjustments are reasonable, and also whether justifications for claims are justifiable. And we actually use the same set of standards. When members monitor the administration, you are doing the same thing for the different categories of projects. Dr. Fernando Zhang, this is the last round. I hope you will be a little lenient. Only 3 minutes, yes? I hope the administration will explain this. This time around, you are talking about infrastructural projects. And these are bringing customers to the SILE. There are already many problems with regard to financing SIL East, and we have subsidized the MTR time and again, and it is not going to sustain any losses for sure. And we take on all the losing projects, and now we entrust the same to the MTR, and they come back to say there would be a cost overrun of 30%. They say they have uncharted public utilities underground. Ground investigation showed a different picture. And what kind of a project are we talking about? We are talking about a covered footbridge, a public transport interchange. We are repairing the public NOLA. These are very simple projects. And there is a cost overrun of 30% because of very common problems. And we ask you how you're going to improve the system. You say there is no intention to improve it. Chairman, give them some time, please. If we are going to build such simple footbridges in the future, how can you prevent a recurrence of cost overrun? Because in your original estimate, you have a contingency fee, you have price adjustment factors. You should not come back again for a 30% overrun. How can you prevent a recurrence? Director. Thank you, Chair. In previous meetings, members asked the same question, and the MTR explained that it would learn the lesson from this experience and improve ground investigation work in future. It would do its best to prevent any cost overrun in future. The MTR explained that already. I don't know whether the MTR would like to add. Well, that is far too vague. You have not said anything. You said you would try your best. Every time you come here to say you try your best, but we are like an ATM every time. And you squeeze money out of us. Tell me exactly what you are going to do. MTR was not born yesterday. It had executed very complicated projects. How come building a footbridge would cause a cost overrun of 30%? Can I ask the MTR to say something about specific measures? Mr. Wong. Thank you, Chair. We share members' concern. In Hong Kong, we are entering a different stage of construction. Before, we did not have to build in such densely built-up areas. This time around, we had exerted a lot of effort in tackling ground investigation, and we had availed ourselves to new technology. At the CIC, we would also refer to the Geo Guide. Mr. Tanya Chen, 1 minute. I don't really understand. In the papers, it says that in 2010 you committed a consultancy to do the assessment to see whether you will be able to make some money. And then maybe not, so you gave them the right to develop the superstructure at Wong Chuk Hang Station. But I'd like to ask you, you give them the development right. In 2010, you did the assessment. At that time, Chairman, you remember the full land premium already discounted the MTR factor. It was too imaginative indeed. You are an investor, a chairman. You understand that, right? Okay, fine. They sold the property, the residential property. After stage 1, did you not review it? Because they made lots of money. And later on, when you calculate full premium, would you also include the MTR factor? Ever since the merger, this is the first time. And secondly, in 2010, you did the assessment. Would you do another assessment later to calculate or estimate its revenue? Because you did it wrong. And if they are making so much money, why would they need another $900 million from you? It's peanuts to them. Ms. Poon, well, when we did the financial arrangement for SILE, we made the decision and we reported to members. We have heard members' concerns and views. When we launch new railway projects, we will give them full consideration. Thank you. Dr. Edward Yiu, 1 minute. Chairman, since I discover that the papers are grossly misleading, I would request for withdrawal of the papers. In the latest paper, you say the $29.1 million was based on the prices in September 2010. However, if you go to page 7 of the paper for PWSC, that is page 44, it says adjustment of the on-cost. It says $29.1 million, and it is payable at MOD prices. It states here. So it is not as what you said in your latest paper that is based on September prices in September 2010. I request that you withdraw this paper. Who would answer the question, Ms. Poon or Mr. Lau? Can you kick off first? Yes, Chairman. Perhaps we did not write our papers in too well a manner, but if you would refer to the annex, enclosure 4, if you read enclosure 4 carefully, the $29.1 million, as you can see, it is subtracting A from B. And we are also talking about prices in September 2010. So later on, we will pay more attention to presentation. Okay, we go into the last round, 3 minutes. Only Mr. Leung Kwok Hong has pressed the button. If you also would like to use the last 3 minutes, please press your button. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, are they going to withdraw the paper? She has explained. But Mr. Edward Yiu has asked that the paper be withdrawn. Administration, no. You are using your time. Now, according to ROP, is it that we cannot ask for withdrawal of papers? Well, you can, and then the administration can say yes or no. She explained. Yes? If the administration says, well, this is in written form, right? If there is an inaccurate presentation, well, I don't know, as Mr. Edward Yiu was saying, that it is a kind of false representation. Is it that the administration can use half a page or a paragraph for it to be tabled at the Legislative Council here to be a correction So at least we have something in paper instead of us endorsing something not knowing that there was false information. Ms. Poon? I still would like members to understand that our supplementary information and presentation have been using figures, and we have stated what prices we were using, and we have been consistent as to what was pointed out by members. We would go back and review the situation, and we can consider how we can correct it. No, I'm not asking for a future review. I'm talking about this paper. I'm not asking you to retract the paper. But as another member here, if you say something that overrides a certain page, if you say the information was correct, or if you say a certain paragraph should be read in a certain way, then we should have a different basis for endorsing the paper. Can you explain in written form? Director, Chairman, can I add something? As my colleague was saying, this table and its presentation. Now, as you can see, D is the contingency for price adjustment. And what is said here is MOD. And please look at the last figure, 342.2. This is the MOD price. Now, how did we arrive at this figure? It is A, B, C, and E plus price adjustment for A, B, C, E, which is at D. So you add up and you have the figure 3.42.2, and this is the MOD price. Therefore, in terms of presentation, it is just that we took out price adjustment for separate presentation, but the figures are correct, Chairman. Since so many members expressed concern, please supplement another paper after the meeting. Last round, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, 3 minutes. Chairman, many members are speaking up. You talk about teaching people about national sentiments, but you should understand that you are quite thick-skinned also at this meeting. When you face a problem, you can tackle it in either of these two ways. First, you can try to rectify it. Say if there is this Chinese pan or wok, which is already very old from wear and tear, you might want to repair it, or you might want to destroy it altogether because it is beyond repair. This is how you are facing us. The wok itself is so problematic, and so you seek to destroy it. But if we destroy it, we would be blamed for obstructing the development of Hong Kong. And the cycle goes on. And such theatrics are repeated every week. You would say, we would answer you next time, and then next time, and then next time. And then we continue to have cost overruns. Frankly, a responsible government should not do that, even if we stand on the opposite side. Even if you do not agree with us, you should consider what we say because we are reasonable. Now, this wok is already problematic, and are we saying we should just destroy it? I cannot see any remorse on your part. I cannot see what you are proposing to do positively about financial monitoring, or what improvements you would bring about in future railway projects. You are simply saying this is commercially non-viable, and you say, I must entrust the railway project to MTR, I must pay it, and I must ask the MTR to build it, and then you would allow the MTR to milk you. Secondly, your second approach is that you shoot an arrow, and then it sticks into a person, but then you would just saw it away from the surface of the skin, and then the arrowhead will cause muscle decay and further damage. Please respect yourselves. The cost overrun is alarming. We are paying one-off sums which are huge. This is public money. Of course, you will have the project endorsed today. I just count the number of members here. You will know that you will get what you want. We are going to build more railways. We will also build more highways. We will also continue with reclamation, and will continue to waste money. If there is no good method to do this, there cannot be good administration. Dr. Fernando Zhang, 3 minutes. Chairman, this project should be linked to the entire SILE, but this one, of course, is about accessibility for SILE because they link to the commercial and residential areas around SIL. In the past, if we saw a private rail line, for example, and if it links to other facilities, including a shopping mall, well, the MTR did that before, and it would pay for certain of the cost, but now we take it all on ourselves. How much public resources are we pouring into SILE? No one is telling us exactly how much. Apart from $9.9 billion, as stated by the DS, we are also giving them the residential property rights. And the MTR doesn't need to pay the land premium as if it includes the SILE. So it's much depressed, and the MTR is set to make a huge profit. And this EPIW, it is entrusted to MTR, and there is a cost overrun. We, the gatekeepers, cannot be blamed for asking all these questions. Is it that the MTR is just milking us as it likes? Well, it's not so much money. Of course, it's $200 million, and the whole railway will cost over $10 billion, and the future profits will also be in the tens of billions. But this is a 9.9 or 900 million project, and yet the cost overrun is 30%. And yet we are talking about very simple infrastructure projects. The reasons you submit are the very common problems whenever you do ground investigation. Chairman, at the FC we are the gatekeepers, but our job is getting more difficult. As Longhair was saying, sitting opposite us are officials who don't have to care a lot whether they present the correct information, whether they have good reasoning and good justification. They will just come here and treat it as an ATM machine. But you have to explain to Hong Kong people why every time there is a cost overrun, and the reasons for the cost overrun are the very commonplace reasons. And when I ask you what lesson have you learned, what improvements you would bring in to do your future estimates, and then you just say you try your best. You say you have learned your lesson. That's nonsense. Yes, Chairman, you are the chairman of the FC. We have handled so many cost overrun cases. Is this going to continue? Who would take the question? Chairman, we don't want to see cost overruns either. We at the administration don't want to see this either. When the highways analyzed information from the MTR, it found that indeed there were objective factors. And we have stated the reasons in the paper, and we would learn a lesson. And later on, when we launch railway projects, we would try our best to reduce the situation of cost overrun. But I like to say, in fact, cost overrun cannot be avoided in large infrastructural projects. About SILE, as I said, there was also a 25% overrun for the MTR as well. That amounts to $3.4 billion because the MTR has the ownership. Ms. Tanya Chan, well, I think the officials are really very caring, not to the public, but to the MTR. It says the MTR is also shouldering $3.4 billion more, so we should sympathize with the MTR as well. But please sympathize with the public. I want to be fair to the officials, but If we continue like this, the MTR is going to grow even fatter. From land premium, the calculation of full land premium, and also giving them the development rights. You say you did your sums in 2010, saying that there is a great opportunity that there would not be enough money. So counting the MTR factor, the parameters would be too big, and the administration might not be able to support it.
So when the general public, when they go and buy a flat, they can consider the MTR factor, and that's why we see real estate prices skyrocket. But when you ask the MTRCL to build the MTR and you give them development rights, when you calculate the land premium, you don't consider the MTR factor. So the public doesn't comprehend that. Does that mean that they're not going to build MTR? So when you calculate the land price, you have to calculate the vicinity facilities. So the public had a lot of expectations. The traffic was going to improve, and you said that you need to connect basic facilities. I mentioned that the footbridge that had been discussed in Southern District Council. It's a similar length, but they did not investigate it because that wasn't a prime location. And I also want to ask, under what circumstances will the government engage MTRCL, such as, for example, in West Kowloon? They are part of the board of directors, but so they would engage West Kowloon, and West Kowloon would have to outsource it to consultant. Why doesn't the government do it themselves? If they are capable, but in some areas, the government should undertake the works themselves. They should not delegate to MTRCL. That's what I don't understand. Regarding the figures, if we have errors in the paper, it is not acceptable. Whether government officials or MTR officials, they should be very cautious. We cannot have errors on these grave issues. I don't need them to respond. I would like this to be a lesson. So whether we have geological surveys or land premium calculations, all that should be reviewed. Mr. Leung Yu-zhong. Learning from experience, improving the future, all this sounds good, but can you really improve in the future? We don't know. We all know that you are seeking extra funding, and that is not the first occasion. So in the past, how much have you learned? In each project, how much have you improved? We don't know. We are monitoring your performance. You say you monitor MTRCL. You use your guidelines, your procedures to monitor, to supervise MTRCL. But in many past projects, your procedures and guidelines are problematic. So when you deploy your questionable methods to supervise others, how credible is that? We know that MTRCL doesn't mind, there's no loss. They ask for extra funding, they get it. They are acting like a middleman. How much effort do they expend? So even though you say it's 200 million, 280 million, it's not a lot. This money, if it were spent on poverty alleviation, a lot of people would benefit. You just say you've done your part, but I'm saying you haven't done your part. When I supervise you and ask for your guidelines and rationale, you cannot provide them. Your reason is that it's just too numerous. So how do we play our role? You said that legislators are watching your performance. I want to ask you once again. Tell me, how can I supervise your work? Can you answer? You don't have specific you don't have reasons for this extra funding. How do we supervise you while you supervise other people? Director? Legislators have been auditing the large and small engineering works. In the process, legislators ask questions and we explain in detail. We provide information. We try to provide this information. So how legislators want to monitor, supervise the government? Well, we are in total compliance. Starly, I need to declare that the accounting firm I work with is the auditor of MTRCL. I'm not involved in the relevant auditing work. So in the Sha Tin Central budget overrun funding, here we're dealing with SILE. Now, when the public hear about overrun budgets, they have to accept it very reluctantly. We understand the railway needs to expand its network, especially in Hong Kong. Every day, it bears the brunt of transport needs, and the public don't accept budget overruns. But we understand that if we don't support the funding, we cannot accept the consequences of, and we have to accept it reluctantly. As I said last occasion, we need to learn from experience. The new CE and the new team say they have a new approach. They will deal with difficult problems. So I think the relationship with MTRCL and how do we avoid budget overruns, this is one of the top priorities of the new secretary. Well, the secretary has been in the job for some time now, and even though the overrun is not this term government's responsibility, but we already have a lot of budget overruns, and it is the council's concern and the general public's concern. So will you have this as a high priority? Can we simplify the projects when we negotiate with MTRCL? Can they bear some of the budget overrun costs? So I would like to know, does the new government have this work in mind? And if you don't, do you have a timetable, Ms. Poon, regarding rail works budget overruns? We've heard your views from the past. As I said, we don't want to see these problems. When we propose new railway projects, including the new projects in Railway Plan 2014, the financing and planning, we will take on board legislators' recommendations. We will ensure that our works can be within budget and also completed on time. Mr. Yu Chong-yi. As a legislator returned through the survey functional constitution, I've been involved in contractual works for many years, and I have detected two grave areas, and the government does not wish to withdraw it. I have to put forward a motion. I have to adjourn you want to adjourn the meeting? You want to withdraw the paper? I want to adjourn the item. 3 minutes. Why do you wish to adjourn? There are at least two grave errors in the paper. First includes previously I asked you to withdraw the paper because when you first approached the PWSC, you had in black and white stated that the whole construction design fee would increase by 29.1 million, and you need and in your direct response to legislators on this sum, you confirmed it would only increase by 29.1 million, and until we required detailed MOD cost distribution prices, then you only disclosed that it was not 29.1 million. It was 59.5 million. Now, this is a severe error. And when in project management, we have a goal-keeping function. We cannot indefinitely expand by a straight line percentage and allow management fees and to be directly linked to construction fees, because it provides an incentive to enlarge the overall sum, and they can achieve a benefit through the percentage. So the construction industry, they will have a staggered approach or a ceiling for management fees. So even if you disagree to undertaking management, you should tell us at least how much you have paid to MTRCL, the management fees you paid to MTRCL. You only mentioned 29.1 million. You did not mention the actual figure of 59.5 million. The second discovery, the second grave error, was that the MOD adjustment prices, on all the papers, it is referred to construction price and salary changes over time, and these are calculated with external formulas. But on this occasion, you see that the VO and claims $230 million. This is the price adjustment to Mr. Nathan Law. We see that the government says it's a basic infrastructure, but it's to serve the SILE. And the controversy is that the SILE, the government has a deal with MTRCL, including property development rights. And how was it calculated? It was a behind-the-doors deal between the two. So the government, we suspecting them of giving the MTR a sweet deal. The development rights are based on a price when the MTR is not in operation. We understand that when the MTR is on operation, the land rights, the land values would skyrocket. So the government papers say that they have to undertake risks. There are a lot of uncertainties, but they are giving the MTR a sweet package. So when the real estate is developed, the railway will be in operation. So the land values are based on the MTR in operation. So what unforeseeable factors are you considering? What risks are you considering that have to be borne? I don't see that scenario. So when chairmen and officials, they say that we're only looking at basic infrastructure, we should not look at SILE, that is not fair. Because when the government gave these development rights, it's to cover the price discrepancy. But if it's so much that it can even cover the construction costs, it can cover the budget overrun, then when we monitor public funds, should we approve these funds? The MTRCL has pocketed a lot. Do we... It's for residents to use the MTR, it's to make it convenient, it's also an infrastructure project. Should we pay that? And we haven't heard a persuasive response. So in the future, when you do undertake these projects, even if your discussion is so closed and you have some very obvious decisions, you have given the MTRCL tens of billions, well, that puts us in a difficult position. It is hard to approve the funding without questions asked. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Yu Chung-yung, for proposing the adjournment of item, and I support that. I'd like pro-establishment to consider supporting that because subsequently we have an education funding. We want to align with the CEs where we would like to approve it before summer recess. I am confident that the chairman can handle this. So Mr. Yu Chong-yim's accusation is a very grave one. Up till now, whether it's us or the pro-establishment, we don't have a full picture. The government has not said that you're making it up. It seems that we're talking about two different things. We need a paper to deal with this accusation before we can vote on this item. If they are making things up, if our understanding is incorrect, you need to explain. Of course, we can attempt to resolve this later on. So, in the face of this budget overrun, even though Highways Director, you're saying you welcome the council's scrutiny, but we cannot scrutinize a budget overrun, and it's almost impossible not to not fund you. We want to clarify what is the government responsibility. We can either reprimand you, or we can ask you to ensure how this will not happen in the future if it's the MTRCL's responsibility. So we hope that in the future that they should not place so much confidence in the MTRCL. They need to negotiate vigorously, and I really sympathize with the director, Mr. Zhong. He's been in the position less than a year, and all this is a leftover from Lau Ka-keung's term. So, Mr. Zhong, Director Zhong, you've been through the XRL, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, and even the Sharton Central Link. You might not be directly involved, but given so many budget overruns and delays, you've been on the job for a year. You should conduct a review for FC. You should tell us how you can. You cannot say that I hope we don't overrun. We don't have delays. You need some short-term, medium-term, long-term measures, Mr. Leung Ko-hong. Well, Chairman, withdrawing the paper is appropriate, since we all feel that, well, you can think you can. Let's say we're not so intelligent and we don't understand your rationale, so it's appropriate to withdraw it. We have continuously asked officials and MTRCL, how can we prevent these budget overruns? Just now, Mr. Lau answered the 9.9 billion is not relevant. We're saying that you have mixed up the figures. The 10% contingency fee, and you have a coefficient. You have a quantity surveyor do the figures. There are some issues where the MTRCL, they have missed the opportunity and lead to budget overruns. So is this inevitable? I don't think so. It can be avoided. When you make the decision, you need to be decisive. You can ask other people. Some people can make a decision. So when you mix up the figures, we cannot monitor your work.
We've asked you many times, and you said that it's it's the same, amount, and that there had not been any additional, amount spent. But we need to monitor how it works, right? When you apply for funding, we will need to closely monitor the budget. You've already asked for $9.9 billion. You are now asking for more. So we therefore have to ask questions. We don't even have we're not. So you understand that this is a problem which you've caused yourself when we ask you. Now I'll say this again. You can take back the paper. Would it be a serious problem if you were to delay the payment to the MTRC? Well, Carrie Lam said that it's very urgent that we approve the funding for education purposes. So I think we have to weigh the pros and cons. We always talk about the new administration and the new style of administration. When you need to deal with a crisis, do you have the the will to manage risk? You can go forward or take a step back, but you're saying that you can't take a step back. Well, that's in that case, and I guess eventually we have to put this to the vote. Fernando Jiang. Well, it's not the first time to deal with. We are dealing with MTR projects. The MTR, it's a monopoly. They already have a market share of 50% of the public transport market. The MTRCL, it's actually a company, a listed company, which has been actually, which is a brainchild of the Hong Kong government. Initially, it belonged to the people of Hong Kong, but after it became listed, it became an asset which is operating on commercial principles. So for all the MTR projects, we would pay them for the works to build these railways. And even for these infrastructural projects, they actually, ancillary to these railway projects. After all the infrastructural projects have been completed, they will bring more customers for the MTRC, and then the MTR will make a profit out of the shopping malls and the topside development. And every year the MTRC will make tens of billions of dollars, and will continue to allow them to raise the fares. So this whole arrangement is ridiculous. Today, for those works which we think you should be responsible, you have further cost overruns. We ask you for the numbers, and you say you can't provide them. When Eddie G, Nathan Law, and Dr. Yeo asked many questions about the management fees of the MTRC, your answers have been most inconsistent. You were so vague, and in the end, we pointed out that you were not correct. And then you told us that you were referring to the 2010 prices. So I don't understand why the SAR government, using Tanya Chan's term, why are you favoring the MTRC like that? While we, as the gatekeepers, feel that we are being simply, ripped off. And all these so-called unforeseen circumstances. These are circumstances that could be foreseen in typical work contracts. The projects that we're talking about is about the construction of pedestrian walkways. So I have no particular views as whether or not we should adjourn our debate on this item. But I think the entire cost overrun and the whole arrangement and the whole funding arrangements are not reasonable. So we cannot allow the MTR to rip us off anymore. Dr. Yeo, you have 1 minute. I hope colleagues will read carefully the paper. Other than the $29.1 million, which does not tally with the actual numbers, there is another major black hole, which is the contingency for price adjustments. We are talking about here the price changes over time, but in reality, it includes it covers also change in design and variations of works, and also the management fees which the MDR charges the government. They are not the same as preparation for price adjustment. Preparation for price adjustment does not mean that. So this is a serious misrepresentation. You tell people you are applying for funding for price variation, but in fact the money is not used for price adjustments. All right, I will now put the item to the vote that this committee would adjourn the discussion on paper FCR 2017-18-13. The division bell will ring for 5 minutes.
我提一提大家呢，我哋即將投。
To remind members, we'll soon be voting on whether or not we agree to adjourn this item. Voting begins. Please stop voting now. We'll display the result. We have 20 in favor, 31 against, and no abstention. I declare that the motion is not carried. We'll now move on to the last round of 3 minutes each for every member. Chen Chi-chun. I think you already used your time. So, Mr. Chen Chi-chun, you have 3 minutes. Mr. Chairman, I have always wanted to help the administration to find out, especially in respect of the geological investigation, whether the MTR had actually been negligent. And because of that, we don't have to pay them as much. If you ask me, of course, the amount of payment, I mean, due to the fault of the MTRC has wrongly assessed the geological conditions at the Wangchak site and resulting in serious cost overruns, and we shouldn't pay for that. So my question, I don't think my question was not answered earlier. That is, how long does it take to build, a working platform? If you say it would take 3 months, does it mean that it simply cannot be done? Because you can't do anything during the rainy season. If you do anything to it, it will stop the flood prevention works, and then you can only erect the platform during the dry season. After that, you will proceed with the site investigation. So if you only erect the platform in November, and by the time it's completed and you start the geological investigation, and then the rainy season starts again, and you have to demolish it, and that will get in the way of the flood prevention works. So it simply cannot be done. Is that the case? Or is it not like that? Never mind whether or not the project will be delayed for 6 months or a year. If is it possible that you could, master the time accurately and be able to complete the project? But that's not what I heard. What I've learned is that the problem lies with the fact that you did not master the time properly, and resulting in a delay for the project. I'll defer to the MTRCL. To answer Mr. Chen's question, I think we've earlier on already explained that in the whole investigation process, we follow the relevant guidelines. Mr. Chen talked about the platform. My colleagues already said that we've conducted all the geological investigation works. If we were to carry out more investigation, we wouldn't have time for that. So in the whole surveying works, from the time we do our design to the time the geological office come up with the guidelines, by the time we've taken every necessary step, but we did not have time afterwards to build a platform. So what I want to know is what has gone wrong. Is it because of the alignment which needed to be changed? You had not planned for that. So you did not include it at the initial stage. If you have done that, it's possible that you might have completed the work. Is that right? Let me explain again. My colleague already said earlier that at a very early stage, in the preliminary design, there was no alignment yet. Even 3 years ago, we didn't have the alignment yet. when the design was completed, we knew about the latest alignment, then we can know where exactly we will erect the platform and then proceed with the investigation. Now, members who have not used the 3 minutes yet, please press the button now. I'll ask Mr. Lau Chun to answer some of the questions raised earlier. Thank you. Mr. Yiu made some serious allegations against the administration, especially the provision for price adjustments. I'd like to clarify that the government certainly does have no intention to mislead the public or members. In the PWSC paper, when we apply for funding to the PWSC, we would always list the various items for the projects and the major expenditure items for members' reference. And we also have provision for price adjustments so that the lump sum could be converted into money of the day prices for members' reference. So this is the formula we've used over the years. But as I said, the government will try to review that formula to see whether or not it could be revised or improved upon to make it more transparent. For the detailed breakdowns of the lump sums and the price adjustments will apply to different items of the projects, so that now we don't have an amount for earmark for the payment arising from price adjustments. The amount that we are showing here is to give members an idea. That is, when you have a lump sum, starting from a lump sum to the amount to be paid according to money of day prices, roughly what will be the difference. So this is to give members a general idea, and this is the way we presented this to members. But noting members' concern, we will go back and consider whether we need to, improve on our presentation. Okay, it's almost time. Let's come back at 5 past 11.